So if anybody would like to share their impressions of the film, what caught your attention? What were some of the elements, the visual elements that were that were interesting to you? If you can raise your hand or make some sort of movement, you can unmute yourself. That'd be great.
I guess that the relationship or the relationships and the way that some of the people in the film have these long-term connections to Linn throughout, you know, it's an extended period of time. I guess I'm just figuring out from the information in the film. I think Linn is about 31 now or something like that. And some of these people have been around Linn's life for maybe the last 12 to 15 years for some of them. And in a sense, to see that transformation over time and how these relationships, you know, remain steady. And at the same time, how there is an adjustment, you know, there's all sorts of life situations, especially in Linn's life, right, that take place and provide her the platform for a different perspective on what she's doing and what she's about and what makes her, what keeps her, her mind and her focus and her sort of direction trained and or refined. You know, she comes through that illness, and she seems to be a sort of a more focused message of it, and less afraid of sort of the vulnerability that all these relationships and all these friendships would bring around. Instead, it's, you know, there's just a context that she lives in. So I thought that was very neat.
So one aspect is the vulnerability that it's very present, and how the body suffers, goes through transformations. And even in the film, she mentions that the body is a site of resistance, and that resistance. She fathoms that resistance to a heteronormative system, but also a cultural form of resistance. Anyone else? I would like to hear more about your reactions to the film.
I want to comment on something in relation to what Manuel said. In terms of the affections, they are also transgressive. Because if you notice, obviously it's his own relationship with his own body, but when he's taking a shower with his mom, when he's taking a shower with his friend, so these kind of corporeal affections that are not erotical in that way, but they are still transgressive. So that's something that really caught my attention.
Brenda.
There are many things about this film that I really like, but one of the things that I found very powerful are how she deconstructs the female body when she says it is exhausting to be a woman, to pretty much to adhere to heteronormative demands, and she as a Bixa Travesty, she says she doesn't want boobs, she doesn't want this, she doesn't want to go into all that process of becoming that that female body that is required to have in order to be a woman. And she said, like, I am a woman and a cis woman. And I found that really fascinating, among other things in the film.
Yeah, and at the same time, she expresses that doubt, right? Because she also says, well, but maybe I would like, but not right now. You know, just that sort of that awareness that she is not trained to follow one path or another. You know, she herself is sort of creating that path. And I just found that enlightening, because very often when you put people in front of a camera, they become these congealed, very sort of cohesive, made up concoctions of themselves instead of who they actually are. And I just felt that in this film, she was not afraid to show some of those self-doubts, despite the very subversive and the very active resistance that her act and her life are about.
Emilio.
Yeah, I was thinking that the ambivalence that she feels toward hormones or changing her body is very interesting, because it happens that by chance I was watching a video yesterday about somebody that was exactly the opposite, that there was an obsession to change the body from female to male. And there is a big contrast with Linn in that sense.
Jairo, por favor.
Hey David, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I totally love the documentary. I was really like interesado in the montage, because it's really it's the thing that how it montage like the music videos of her music performance with her own life, then talking head, then these dual interviews that I find that a former documentary guy to give the person that you're talking to these dual interviews, like, oh, let's talk about this subject not as one person but at multiple persons, that it gives a different layer to the documentary that I find totally fascinating in the way he constructed. I didn't check who's the director of the documentary.
Cecilia, hold on.
She make an outstanding job in the montage of this film. It's beautiful done.
Yeah, Cláudia Priscilla and Kiko Goifman. Kiko Goifman happens to be a friend also that is present in the documentary. And with regards to montage and format, it's precisely deconstructing femininity. It talks about the fluidity of bodies, and what you have mentioned so far relates to something very powerful that she says in the middle of the film when she's talking about not just the body and how it's affected, its archaeology, its territories, its earthquake that shakes the subjectivity itself. She mentions that all creation involves destruction, and it's interesting to relate that to that aspect when she's talking about peripheral practices of knowledge production. In that sense, we see how the film also is trying to deconstruct the trans identity. It's trying to denaturalize the feminine body, and at the same time playing with this fluidity of genders. Anyone else, anything that resonated? Carlos.
Yeah, I think like when you first mentioned at the beginning about Una Mujer Fantástica, I think like one of the contrasts between this Bixa Travesty and Una Mujer Fantástica is that is genitalia in the film, right? In this film, like near the end, like you see the not just nude bodies at the beginning, but also like explicit images of male and of genitalia, and which is very different from what you see in Una Mujer Fantástica, where at the very end, what you see is a small mirror. And that mirror is kind of like the reflection of, that shows the reflection of the protagonist's face, but also that covers the genitalia, and that there's this question of the mirror image, right? That I think it's that's raised in Una Mujer Fantástica, but in Bixa Travesty, there's this willingness to not in the North American sense of revealing revealing oneself, but of, I think, like a sense of exposure, of kind of like a sense of freedom in one's own body. That it's very, like, I think it's interesting to, like, when you mentioned Una Mujer Fantástica, like watching this film made me think of that kind of contrast, right? And the importance of genitalia, and as to why, like, you know, when Jairo was talking about like the montage and the selection of specific scenes and why, I think it's interesting. And it kind of like makes me think of Posser's book Second Skins, where like there's a whole chapter dedicated to like what does it mean to be transgender, but also what does it mean to photograph and to put in an image, you know, one's own genitalia. But that's something I thought.
Hi, David. I'm Marilu. I have only a comment. Something that really caught my attention in this film was the courage to express yourself, since you see that we live in a society when gender is a strong topic of the day-to-day. And as she said, or he said, it is difficult to accomplish some norms or some expectations about what is to be a woman, or also what is to be a man. And when she or he expressed himself or herself, is something that go against the traditional rules, and more when we live in countries in Latin America that are so much traditional, or we live under some religious beliefs. So I was surprised about this courage, but also I understand that it's really important to have this freedom of speech, because only when she is talking about his history, people, like most part of people that live in a population, can understand his feelings, her soul, how she's seeing the world. That is something that in everyday life you really don't have so much time to think about that. So I think it's really important, the freedom of speech, freedom to show yourself, and also to talk about what you feel from other people also understand you. Yep.
And tying that back, that last comment by Marilu, the presence of music in the film is very important. Luciana.
No, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the montage that we were talking. I'm a friend of Cláudia Priscilla and Kiko Goifman, and so I know their work for a long time. And there is something that is very interesting in their films, is that at the same time that they play in Bixa Travesty with the gender, like the fluidity of masculinity and feminine, they're always in their works playing with these, like the fluidity of gender, also in documentary or in fiction. So what is real, or what is unreal? This is so this is very present and strong in this film. Sometimes you don't know if they are acting or if they are really talking about something that is real. And so I just wanted to comment this.
Thank you, Luciana. Thank you for your comment. Anybody else? What resonated? What made you? It was a very, it's an intimate film, in spite of its transgressiveness. I think going back to Paola's comment on the affectivity of the body, I think that we see these abject corporealities that are the abject acquires a different meaning. And in that sense, I read it as also transgressive, in that it is denaturalizing sexuality in a way. We don't see sexuality simply as this unbridled desire, but as also both as a weapon, but also as some sort of cultural capital that is embodied, and that allows Linn to interact with the world. We have illness, we have cancer, we have graphic images of genitalia, that in a way also pushes our own perceptions of what it means to embody a female or a male body. I was making a comment about music because at the beginning of the film and throughout it, she starts doing some sort of like rap, spoken word type of poetry, but she fathoms music not only as a cultural practice of resistance, but also music as a weapon. And we see how that is being banged onto us within the different collage and montage of images, and how that is beautifully deconstructing in a way, or rather than deconstructing and using a kind of like passé word, it's appreciating the complexity of Afro-descendant trans women in depressed areas of Sao Paulo, and how they express that radical way of being. Anybody else? Are there any themes that resonated with you? The notion of the body that I go back to, an archaeology, a territory, it's very impactful to think of our bodies as a map, perhaps, or as a palimpsest, as a site where we can find traces, when we can see the passage of time, and where a space in which also boundaries are being drawn and redrawn. See, Emilio.
See, I was very concerned at the beginning because there were so many issues at the same time that I said, I have to find what every film has. Somebody that represents the pattern, the establishment. I was fascinated with the scene in the little kitchen, because the mother seems to express the patterns against which Linn is rebelling against. It was God. She mentions God, desire, femininity, everything. But then the movie explodes when the mother is is taking a shower with Linn, which is an enormous break of rules. So for me, I think that was the greatest break with the rules, when the person who is saying that is the pattern. I mean, she says, people treat me very well in where I work. They love me. God, she mentions God. She represents the establishment. And if I were going to think of something to write about this fabulous film, I would start with the mother, because otherwise I cannot put together so many things in my head. Anyways, that's my comment.
Thank you, Emilio. Just piggybacking on what just Emilio said, this idea of it's not only a critique of the essentialist views of gender, but it's also pushing the boundaries as to what kinship and intimacy represent. The mother holding the body of Linn close to her own and reimagining the lines of family structures, reimagining intimacy and belonging through other lenses that forgo or debunk the idea of the traditional bourgeois or middle-class family structure. Anybody else that would like to contribute to some of the themes? There is a powerful message that I would like us to flesh through that actually has an impact on the way we think about it. So in that sense, I would like to hear, what do you take from this film? How do your own perceptions of gender, femininity, masculinity, family structures, your own perceptions of trans lives and disabilities and vulnerabilities in Sao Paulo are reshaped or perhaps are enlightened by this powerful performance in film?
Just both like a comment and a question. Because Bixa Travesty is, I mean, it's not just the title, it's also kind of like this kind of like a concept that that she's forming, and kind of like explaining not just through these talks, but also through the music. And I was wondering, like it seems like it's kind of like raising this, it's like transgressing the border between woman, man, identifying oneself as woman, but at the same time questioning that very category of woman. And so, like, what I found informative and useful about the film was how it's not just it's not just something that's explained through like the specific, like the radio talk, but also something that is manifested through performance art, through music. And I found that interesting, but I was interested in other people's take on, like, because Bixa, right, it's like, it's also a word like, you know, it refers to like beast, the animal. It's also in Spanish, bicho. And then like travesti is, you know, just the English travesty. And so it's like an interesting mix. And you also see like in the tattoos, like you see like Portuguese and and English as well. So there's also like a mix of languages too. So it's like, I don't know, it was something like I found like curious about like the use of, you know, using this kind of concept and not just transgression of, you know, different like, you know, not just like gender borders of woman, man, but also like linguistically creating a concept that is a mesh of languages. But it's something that caught my eye about the film.
It's very important what you raised, Carlos, because Bixa Travesty is translated loosely in English into English as tranny fag. Forgive my but you know, but it's an act of reappropriation, you know, of signifying the violence attributed to the word. So in that way, there is a semantic process in which linguistic violence is subverted. And at the same time, it's very interesting because it's also grounding, going back to this way of producing peripheral knowledges, is also grounding an epistemology. It's also grounding how trans lives can be expressed or contained beyond the discourses of trans identity from the United States or Europe. So in that sense, it's also powerful in that Linn is naming her own space, her own point. In Spanish, would be it would be something along the lines of ese sitio de enunciación. She is grounding her voice through a different epistemology that does not follow those histories heavily documented by the work of Susan Stryker or Jack Halberstam or even Beatriz Preciado. We are really in contact with a different epistemology, an epistemology of trans identities, an epistemology that is embodied, that's performed, and then that it's lived. It's lived through the vulnerability of the trans materiality and that fragility and vulnerability.
Hey. Yeah, I think that David's comment is awesome, because I was thinking while everybody was talking and hearing everybody about this kind of epistemology of the Bixa, no? Or even an ontology of the Bixa, because it's not how it learns, but there's a Bixa art, no? This is that art that is violent, that can be tender, but can be really violent. There is this possibility of destruction that I find really, really, like David told before. And also I love that part when it says, I don't know how people don't like me. There's only two people in the world. That's an ontology, no? That's an ontology. So there's only two type of people or beings in the world. Those that doesn't like me, no, those that like me and desire me, and those that don't know me. And that's a total change in how the epistemology is working, because normally trans discourses are normally seen as something that is peripheric, and sometimes you refer at that, but this epistemology is grounded on the Bixa. It's grounded on what she's doing and what her art is doing. So I'm really impacted by that, and I'm like, sure, I'm writing something about this because this shit is awesome. And it was totally. I want to thank David a little un poquito, porque I was teaching this last week, and I was like, oh, I actually don't know how to teach it, and this was like, thank you so much. Let's see.
Thank you, Jairo. Anyone else as we come close to the, oh yes, Luciana, sorry.
Yes, no problem. Just a comment, because when I was watching this film, like again, it was the third time, and I can't stop thinking about how powerful it is for Brazil right now. I think everybody knows about our president, so it's a far-right president. And this film, Linn, is so powerful when her voice is so positive. So I think it's very important for Brazil to have a film like this now, and for many trans people to see their voices represented by Linn. So for me, it's an amazing film also because of that.
You know, from my end, just thinking how important it is to have these voices beyond this, you know, beyond the sort of North America centered general acceptance, and you know, there's this whole world where what Linn does is just so subversive and dangerous and fraught with risk, and that she comes through so clearly she has such a cogent perspective, perhaps because she rubs up against all of these forces constantly in a more obvious way than, in more, let's say, liberal, generally more accepting societies, depending on the state and the city. And, it reminded me in some ways how she takes some of these symbols, this symbolic subversion in the same way that Lia La Sirena does that with La Quinceañera, for example, where she takes, that she appropriates that meaning and celebrates it, and then you deconstructs it for those of us who are more used to thinking, a particular way about what a quinceañera is, and then all of a sudden you think, well, those are the important aspects of it, aren't there? So I just thought that that this film was really important, especially if you're looking from a Latin American perspective.
I just would like to mention that there is a moment, an utopic moment in the film that is repeated a few times, and that is that we are making the macho man run away. It's like we have invaded their space. I always think that is kind of funny, because that is not true. They are invading our space. and I think that is the utopian part of the film, that contrast with the enormous break that Linn is trying to achieve.
I mean, for sure, yes, that utopian drive, that hope in spite of vulnerability, in spite of death, it's definitely present there. And it's as Diana Taylor would say in her latest book, the politics of being present, what it means to inhabit the here and now, and what are the political implications of that. And it's something that it's very present in this film and in the activism that takes place as cultural practice, because we see these audiences come together and interacting with one another and bonding through the power of music. So that's wonderful. That activism, she's also pushing that boundary of what represents or what means to create culture, what is cultural practice beyond the realm of the aesthetic or conceived as, the sublime. It is placing, it's moving, or like it's placing art at the intersections of politics and a politics of life and death for trans lives, which is so powerful. Anybody else who would like to, as we wrap up the discussion, any other closing comments or impressions that you would like to share? How do you see yourselves applying this film, perhaps in a classroom setting with undergrad students or grad students? Film now as a technology is very adaptable, very fluid, transnational, transmedia in a way. So what might be some of the applications for this film, to not just to for pedagogical purposes, but also to engage in that commitment of cultural practice as activism? Brenda.
No, I just think about that. I don't about teaching it in a class. It's not about that. It's about the another thing that that it caught my attention a lot is the how she also talks about in the radio, in the program, how in the spaces where their bodies are accepted and how they are accepted, like when they're performing, they're accepted in these shows, and then we in one scene we see them performing, and then the audience having some kind of orgasmical experience while listening to them talking. However, probably these are the sectors that don't accept them performing in their public spaces, because when they were performing in the street, when they were talking to each other, one of them, I don't remember her name, she said how here we are attacked the most, and in the favelas we are not attacked as much as we are attacked in these spaces where they are accepted as performers just as the entertainers, and how they talk about transphobia, and then how they go and let's talk about this, let's take it out of the little box of transphobia, how they just deconstructs all of these social I don't know how to express them, but social violences against them in every way, socially, politically, bodily, and all of those things.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. Any last words that you'd like to share with all of us as we wrap up the discussion of Bixa Travesty?
Well, if not,
All right.
I want to thank you, David, for taking this time and helping us, through the film and the discussion, the themes. We are really thrilled always to have you around, but especially when you can connect so clearly to a topic that is something that you really care about and study. So for us, it's a privilege to also have you all join us in this very experimental and strange way of collectively sharing a film experience from the comfort or discomfort of the places where we are away from everybody else. So that in itself is also new. There are some glitches, and we'll be working to refine those in the future. But I want to thank everybody for joining us, for participating, and for sharing this experience.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for the opportunity, and thank you everybody for joining us in this new way of connecting remotely.